The year 2000's up next. No planes fell out the sky, clocks didn't stop working, and computers were absolutely fine, despite the I love you virus spreading. The less said about viruses, the better, methinks, after this last few years. After his Christmas dinner has digested, the Power makes his way to Purfleet for a stay in his holiday home, the Circus Tavern. He faces Mick Manning, who had reached the last 16 in 1999, and safe to say he didn't reach the last 16 this time. Phil spanked him 3-0 and again averaged over 100 in the first round. The only player to do so. In the second round, he was the only player to average over a ton too, against Graham Stoddart, who again didn't even get a 1 next to his name, like he'd done in 1998. 3-0 and Phil rolls into the quarters. We're expecting a bit of a dip in the performance now from Taylor? Surely, as this is what does seem to happen. Let's see. He faces Alan Warriner, who must be sick to the back teeth of losing to Taylor by now, and this showed in the match versus Taylor. To me, this shows Phil's consistent supremacy in upping his game as time goes on. Warriner is beaten 5-0 and walks off stage without even shaking hands. This surely is a sign of Warriner getting to the end of his tether as he is unable to beat Phil Taylor. As we saw in previous years, Phil's drop in performance was getting less noticeable and further into the tournament. In this year's semi-final, he was up against an unseeded Dennis Smith, who was about to enter the very best years of his own career. The Power turned up the voltage, and I can't wait to say that when it plays against Rob Cross. Smith was handled in the same fashion as all the other opponents, 5-0, and for the fourth time in a row, this was a new record. Taylor had averaged over 100 again and over 105 for the second game in a row. I'm sure Dennis Priestley couldn't wait to play him in the fifth final in the PDC. It was a fourth win in 5 against Priestley for Taylor, who steamrollers Priestley by 7-3. I'm not hesitant to say, but Rafael Nadal is the only champion I've ever seen so dominant in such fierce competition in my lifetime. It's getting worrying for the other players now. As I'm researching this episode, I'm seeing a change of opponents, which signals a new wave of challengers. The first generation players are still hanging in there. Lowe, Warriner and Harrington to name a few. Jamie Harvey was vanquished in expected fashion 10-2. Nigel Justice too, 13-3. John Lode fared equally poorly as he was punted 16-4. Phil has ironed out his mid-tournament dip and defeats BDO stalwart Richie Burnett 17-9 to reach the final to face the aforementioned Alan Warriner. I feel like it's either Harrington or Warriner versus Taylor in every final since 1996. Dennis Priestley must be taking a break from being whooped. Phil is 8-1 on to win the match. Averages coming in were 99 from Taylor and nearly 93 for Warriner, whose nickname perfectly describes his demeanour in the fight. Is he boxing Prime Tyson or just throwing some tungsten against the GOAT? I'd argue the former. Phil immediately breaks Warriner, 1-0. Warriner breaks back in a scrappier leg where both miss multiple doubles. The third leg is a masterclass from both. 2 180s from Allen and 1 in retaliation from Taylor. Warriner looks in the zone and goes 2-1 up, and it's hotting up now. He goes 3-3 in a really high quality affair. Taylor breaks and holds to go 5-3 up, and Warriner hits back to make it 5-4. And the Sid Waddell exclaims how exceptional the final really is. The full match is available on YouTube. The Power is averaging 110.5, and he cannot shake off the Iceman. Poetically, Taylor does begin to pull away with a 1-4-1 checkout to lead 8-4. The high quality continues as Taylor leads 9-5. The legs are shared and Phil's averages 112. At 10-6, blink and you'll miss it. No matter what Warriner does, Taylor matches him and it goes 12-7. Warriner looks beat, both averaging well over a ton. On another day, Warriner could have won with ease, but Taylor is just too good. It goes 15-8 with no lack of effort from Warriner, and Phil comes out after the break looking to tie up the win. But Warriner has different ideas. There's a comeback on the horizon. The match goes 16-9, then 16-10, then 16-11. Phil stems the flow, but it's not over. 17-11 with the Power needing just one leg. Will he get it? Not yet. Warriner wins the next to make it 17-12, but he's left on 300 with Phil needing tops. He pins it on a nervy third dart to seal yet another match play title. As I mentioned previously, new challenges are on the horizon for Taylor as he squeezes past the artist Kevin Painter, who would only beat Taylor once in 33 meetings. New challenger Chris Mason and Old Fold Dennis Priestley were dealt with quickly 6-1 and 6-1. Shane Burgess didn't fare too much better either. Burgess lost all 11 meetings to Taylor, and this time 6-1. So that was yet another Grand Prix title for Phil Taylor. A smaller tournament up next, the Golden Harvest, which I believe may also be known as the North American Cup. Again, info is pretty scarce. There is an extended highlight video of this on YouTube. It's amazing to see how far darts has come on TV abroad. Phil opens with a 1-3-5 and wins the first set 2-1. Taylor holds his throw, then breaks askew to take the last set and take home $50,000 in prize money. You can see a mixture of relief and excitement from the power. I dare to say it, more than some of his World Championship wins.
We're going to finish up at 2003. So we're on that bend right before the home straight for part 2. Thank you for getting this far, and I sincerely hope you're enjoying it. Please like and subscribe if you do like it. So thanks for watching. And after this short commercial break, let's get back to the darts. 2001, A Space Odyssey up next. It's a busy one, on and off the hockey.
Head over to Facebook and have a look at the page, All Things Darts. There's over 50,000 members and they do some really good charity work too.
Taylor begins to take the game to another level again. During this year's edition at the Circus Tavern, he wins the tournament in almost complete domination, as close to whitewashing a whole tournament as I've ever seen. Pause the video and leave a comment on who you think took a single set off Phil Taylor. On the biggest stage of all of them, Phil faced Nigel Justice, then Les Fitton, followed by Keith Deller and last year's American Open final opponent Dave Askew. Then finally John Part. This isn't the last time Taylor would face Part in the World Final. Shockingly, the person who took the set off Taylor was Les Fitton in the second round. Phil went 3-0, 3-1, 4-0, 6-0 and 7-0 with a tournament average of 100.6. Taylor warmed into the tournament for a change. His lowest average and double percentage was in the first round, where he didn't need to get out of second gear, averaging 94.5. Despite losing weight and claiming his throwing technique was hampered slightly by it, it didn't seem to bother him on the big show. Let's talk about the Golden Harvest next. So it's the third year in a row where Phil Taylor participates in the North American Cup. He lost in the first final and won last year, and as we've said 2 minutes ago. Manly 3-0 in the opener and Old Bob 3-0 in the second round. Rod Harrington in the last eight, and up next was Andy Jenkins, the only man to put two legs together against Phil Taylor in 12 sets of darts. But alas, Taylor is dominant and cruises to a 3-1 win, and as he beats darts legend and BDO statesman Andy Fordham. I love an underdog, but I really wanted to find out that Phil Taylor won this tournament without dropping a set. And then we move from America to Canada, where we have the Le Scratch. And this is a tournament with little info and nothing's available any further than Phil winning the final against Peter Manley. I found the Quebec Open too, and I'm thinking they are different events. But as always the case, these old stateside events, information is like rocking horse poo. So we'll just go with what we've got. And apparently Phil Taylor won this tournament versus Peter Manley as well. And if you know anything else about it, leave a comment below explaining. In a big year of change in Blackpool, with lots of new additions to the PDC, Taylor's crown was more under threat than ever before. Mr. Match Play again faces Jamie Harvey in the first round, smashing him 10-2 and coming as close as he's been to a 9-darter. He mentions how the 9-darter is what he craves most and also more than the tournaments and the prizes at this point. The same score on the same day at the same stage last year. Next up, it's previous year's quarterfinal, Alex Roy. And you guessed it, Taylor dominates him, 13-4. Taylor averages 97 and 101 in these matches, and John Part was up next. And it's another 101 average as the power crushes the big Canadian, 16-4. And up next, it's Martin Adams, who previously knocked out Alan Warriner in a thriller 11-9. Adams has beaten Taylor on two previous occasions, and is there an upset on the cards? Wolfie is playing well, averaging 102, but finds himself 3-1 down. By the fifth leg, Taylor started each leg with either a 180 or a 140, and he's chasing that 9-darter. Will he get it? Adams levels for 3-3, and the first time all week that Phil's throw has been broken. And it's broken once again as Adams takes the match to Phil, who's now down 5-4. And Phil's really concentrating on getting this 9-darter, and he gets to 6 in the 10th leg. A self-assured Taylor retakes the lead 6-5 and is annoyed when he doesn't throw 180. He's got 6 so far. The match goes 7-5, then 7-6, and Phil goes 8-6. And then Taylor clinches the session 4-1 to lead 9-6, and then 10-6 is up next with the grip on the match slipping away from Adams. He regrips to make it 10-7, and it's game on as Adam wins the next legs to break Taylor back to 10-8. It goes 11-9 heading to the break, and the power blows a sigh of relief. It's tops for 12-9 as some serious good quality from both men. And back 180s in the running total of 16 in 23 legs. So soon it's 13-9 and 14-9, and there's 18 180s now. The power shifts up another gear and takes the next 2 legs, and there's nothing Wolfie can do. He scores tumble as Taylor's holds firm. He nails 3 perfect darts to check out 124 to seal a thrilling victory. This was now Phil's best run in the tournament, having won last year's event too. Welshman Richie Burnett was another opponent Phil faced last year, and it's a very similar story. The power outstruck Burnett by 9 points in the averages and by 8 legs to take home the 14 grand purse. But he misses out on the 100k for the 9-darter. Oh, it's getting cold here in October 2001, and it's time to dig out the big coat as we usher in the longer nights as well as the PDC Grand Prix. So settle in, folks. It's like deja vu in the first round where the power plays qualifier Kevin Painter. After last year's 3-2 victory, Phil looks to cruise through. It's not to be, as the biggest shock since Keith Deller in 1983 is about to happen. Taylor slumps to a 2-1 defeat as he's caught cold by the artist. Off the hockey, Phil was on the New Year's honours list and was supposed to be awarded an MBE from the Queen, just like she'd awarded her paedophile son with £12 million. No, too early? Okay. Which is a fairly decent segue what happened to our Phil. No, not Royal Phil, Darts Phil. Yeah. I read an extract from the newspaper rather than come up with a witty script for this bit myself. And no, it's not a crime against fashion, shockingly. So this is from the Scotland Herald. A world champion darts player indecently assaulted 2 young women in his motorhome following an exhibition after one had beaten him in a drinking competition. One of the women, a 23-year-old administration officer, told Dunfermline Sheriff County yesterday that she was subjected to sexual indecency after winning a drinking competition with contestant Phil Taylor, age 40. Yeah, I'm not going to read the full article, but you get the gist.
Let's welcome in 2002. It's Japan and South Korea for the England football team, and the aforementioned Lizard Golden Jubilee, and an annular solar eclipse covers 99% of the sun. In the darting world, it's Phil Taylor and Alan Warriner who enter the year as joint world number 1s, somehow. I'll do a video about the rankings at some point. As the crackers are pulled and the festive footy is in full swing, Phil Taylor faces Paul Williams in the first round, and it's a routine win for Phil, 4-1. Round 2 is a special performance, and it was a poor Shane Burgess on the receiving end. And here's a link that I found here to that match. Taylor averaged an incredible 111.21 and won the match spectacularly 6-1, making their head-to-head 9-0 and 13-1 in sets. Big John Part was next, another man who'd never taken a set off Taylor at the Worlds. He was also 13-0 down in sets to Taylor. This match was 6-0. In the semi-finals, it was Dave Askew again. A third man who'd never beaten Taylor but gave him a good game in the Golden Harvest. Not today though, 6-0. Taylor's tournament average going into the final was 103. And going into the final, Peter Manley had scares against John Lowe and Colin Lloyd. The averages were lower than the usual in the final, suggesting nerves from both due to the mind games Manley is able to play against his opponents. Could they work on Phil Taylor in the second final between the two? Did they, hell. The most interesting part of this final came after the 1-2-1 checkout for the win. Manley does a Warriner and walks off. The pantomime continued as Taylor sarcastically goes to shake thin air and gestures to the crowd. He's now doubled Eric Bristow's tally of 5 World Championships, the absolute best ever. We'll find out soon enough if the streak will continue. On the 19th of May, Phil played an American called Luis Martinez. The Power took the match 4-0 with ease. With no data on Martinez showing any averages higher than 73, the tournament really is a golden harvest for Taylor as he takes his 3rd in a row. From the 4th to the 7th of July, Phil looks to retain his Desert Classic title. Phil played an almost perfect tournament on paper, where his averages increased incrementally throughout, and his opponents were dispatched to nil, apart from the first round against Kevin Painter. He averaged 104 in the final, beating Ronnie Baxter 3-0. Baxter still hanging in there at the sharp end of the game. It's good to see. It's the height of summer, and a genuine hero and super athlete, Lance Armstrong, won his 4th Tour de France title. Meanwhile, at the match play, Phil was about to achieve his own historic feat. Looking at the results and watching the videos available, this was the biggest test I've ever seen Phil face. To me, this has to be the pressure he put on himself to achieve the TV9 data. Taylor did his usual and punished Shane Burgess 10-0. At this point, it could be fair to argue that Burgess was taking bribes to lose to Taylor. But I'll put my suspicions aside because Taylor did this to everyone, and often. Kevin Painter averaged almost 99 against the Power in the second round in a valiant effort to try and stay level in their head-to-head 2-all. Phil was too strong and won 13-6 to advance to a historic moment. There is a nervous tension on the night and an increasing sense of expectation in the air. Step up Chris Mason, statistically almost matching Taylor throughout the front. Mason goes 1 up, but is pegged back. He's back with a great 180, then a nervous double 9 to retake the lead. It's a 120 for Phil to level at 2-all in the match, and the match is well warmed up now. Are we about to witness something amazing? Let's watch. And I will take the copyright infringement for this footage.
Mace knew this was going to happen. Look at him come again with another match. Oh, it's incredible! Get the idea out. This is guarded by numbers. Yes, but he's on the same table here. Dave, I noticed.
And Taylor again switching on the power, and Mason just welching just a fraction in the blast, in the furnace heat that Taylor's power exudes.
Oh, he's thinking about it. Oh, he's on it again. He's on the line data. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. He's on the line data for £100,000.
3 darts away from £100,000. It's never been seen live on television. Don't miss
Potentially
this.
making.
Got to get the treble 20 with the first dart.
Yes, he's got it. Treble 19. Double 12 for history! History! He's done it! He's done it! He's hit the 9 darts! £100,000 quid!
Wow, the Power really is in top gear. His first ever TV9 data, 100 grand in the bank, and essentially the final piece of the Phil Taylor puzzle. Incredible. Imagine being there. And if any of you were there, please comment below. Phil then pulls 4-2 in the lead and Chris looks rumbled. More like a 2 of hearts than an ace, he finds his feet and brings it back to 5-4. After the break, he'd only take 3 more legs as Phil dispatches him 16-7 to reach the semi-finals. What a show. Little did we know that this would be the last meeting between Lowe and Taylor, with Phil being undefeated for 12 years against Lowe. And this would be the most competitive since 1992. There was life in the old dog yet. After succumbing to an early break and a 6-3 deficit, Lowe rallied to take a 7-6 lead. Has Phil had an adrenaline dump from the previous night? He's looking a little unsure to say the least. And just like that, another break from Taylor and he's 9-8 up. Lowe breaks back and halts, finding himself 11-9 up and looking phenomenal on the stats. I'll put them on the screen here now. Try as he may, Phil can't seem to overpower Lowe, and through gritted teeth is 13-11 down, the best performance from Lowe in a decade. Phil's grip on the match and the tournament is waning. Phil does win 2 scrappy legs and levels 13 apiece. It goes from 2 to 4 legs on the spin, and within 10 minutes, Phil has a 15-13 lead and looks in control again. At 16-14, Lowe deals 1 last card and misses 9 for double 16, then eventually checks out double four to go within one. Is there a last-ditch comeback? It's nervy. Phil leaves 140 for Old Stoneface, who can't clear it, and a relieved Taylor checks out 32 for the match. I've never seen such a nervous affair, and the crowd crossing their fingers. It's well worth watching the post-match interview here too. A final looms versus John Part, and it wasn't the first time this year that they'd met Part in a major, as we've seen. It's a very close match, from the first four legs going 3-1 to Phil, which is about as big as a lead he gets until he finds himself 12-11 down. But it doesn't last long, and before you know it, it's 13-all. Is this the time Part finally beats Taylor? Part breaks Taylor for 15-14, and it's happening. Even so, Phil is loving the challenge. Phil misses the bull twice for 16-15 and ends up losing the leg, with Part needing 2 legs for a truly historic win. Phil nails 16s for 16-all, and is this destiny for Part, or is Phil going to show his class yet again and wow the crowd with a grandstand finish? Let's have a look at the finish from the 2 remaining legs. So as it happens, Phil wins again. Scenes in Blackpool. Surely Big John will get him next time. In October, Phil jetted off to sunny Ireland for the Grand Prix, where again he had almost a perfect run on paper. Averages increasing as the tournament goes on and defeating each opponent to 0 until the final. Della 2-0, then qualifiers Jack McKenna and Mark Holden 2-0 and 4-0. Taylor powers past a very poor Peter Everson 6-0 in the semis before taking the stage and thrashing John Part again. Part was seeded second as Phil was 12 points up on the averages at 100 as the tournament draws to a close. When will John's first success against Taylor happen? Surely it's soon. Some smaller tournaments now. The Eastbourne Pro, held from 2001 to 2007, and this was the first and only time the Power clinched the title, beating Richie Burnett for the 4th time in a row. He would remain undefeated to Burnett until 2012. The previous 2 meetings had been relatively close by Taylor standards. And in Montreal, at the Le Scratch Open, Taylor punted Anderson to his 6th consecutive loss to Taylor in a streak where Taylor had beaten 4 consecutive quarterfinals. It's likely Taylor won around $5,000 Canadian here, and it was Phil's 2nd and final conquest here. He probably got bored really, didn't he? Now, speaking realistically, the Power had been all-powerful for years, but this is the first time in the PDC where he's ended the year as PDC ranking leader. Obviously, he'd been number 1 before, and rightly so, but not since 1991 in the BDO rankings. Has Philip ended the year as the calendar numero 1? There was a change in the ranking systems, but not until 2007. This system in 2002 was a points-based system. I'm sure I'll end up making a detailed video on this in the future.
This is where we dip for the finish line in this video, and a year where the PDC began to open up more tournaments, especially in the UK, and this was a stellar year elsewhere for English sports as England beat Australia in the Rugby World Cup final. And sorry for the spoilers, but you know, it was almost 20 years ago. So get ready for some domination as well as a major surprise, and on the same level as The Undertaker at WrestleMania. So from one fake sport to a very real and physically demanding one, here we go. At the World Championship in Frimley Green, Phil was headed for his 9th straight world title. In recent years, he had crushed all opponents on his way and is on 39 match winning streak, which I would bet my mortgage, mum and favourite pair of undies is the longest streak in darts ever. And this was prime midlife crisis for Taylor too, who'd done the Wesley Snipes blonde hair and Culture Club earrings. And I bet he bought a motorbike too. In the first match, Phil took out Steve Brown again, 5-1 this time, averaging a classic Taylor 103, as he'd done in 1996, 7 and 8. He'd managed to avoid Phil for 5 years, but fate was still the same. Phil travelled to Hawaii for a match against Wayne Mardle in the next round. A close affair where Phil slumped to an average of 98 as Mardle battled hard and was eventually sunk 5-3. For those of you who get the sunk reference from Hawaii, well done. A different Dennis was up next, and this time Smith, who was an established PDC pro and ranked 8th for the tournament, and he was doing a Mardle and was also defeated 5-3. To me, this is the closest and most difficult World Championship for Taylor in a while. Phil, meanwhile, was still averaging 100. I feel extremely sorry for Phil's next opponent, who had managed to avoid a spanking for 2.5 years, and was on an 8-match and 7-year losing streak to Phil. No surprises for guessing who it is. Yep, poor Alan Warriner. Phil struggled for his usual 100 average, yet still managed to dispatch Warriner 6-1 in what is supposed to be a stage in the tournament where the cream rises to the top. And despite averaging 95, he beat a poor and crestfallen Warriner, who averaged 10 points less than that. The Iceman had thawed a little in the pre-match interview by claiming that all the players should have the limelight, as well as Phil. Alan clearly had poked the bear. John Part was the dance partner in the final, who'd had a great performance so far. 4-1, 5-3, 5-0 and 6-4, averaging a pretty consistent mid-90s throughout, which was not the hundreds we'd seen previously from our main character in this story. Part took to the stage and towered over the power. He was getting closer to beating Phil over the years, and especially last year. Everyone wanted Part to win, but look who he's facing, a man on a 43-match winning streak, trying to take his 11th world title. And it's a dream start for Big John as he takes a fantastic ton plus checkout in the first leg and takes the first set 3-0 to stun Phil. A super confident Part is averaging 98 as Taylor runs with a 97. He wins the second set too. Sid Waddell thinks it's Phil's dramatic 3-stone weight loss in 4 months which is causing him to throw his darts about 1/4 of an inch lower. And during the third set, Part took a 2-1 lead and was left with double 10 to put the power into an unprecedented 3-0 deficit. The crowd, John and the commentary team beginning to wonder if Phil could do anything to stop Part from running away with the tournament. And it was turning into one of the biggest shocks in darts history. John Part took the first leg of the 4th set and was set to continue his run, but it was not to be. Phil won the set 3-1 and closed the gap to 3-1 in sets. And he celebrates as if he's won the title. The power goes 1-0 up in the 4th set, but is nowhere near enough. Part closes it out with a double 16 to take it 3-2 and retake a 3-set lead. And Phil looks dazed, like he can't quite believe what's actually happening. They head off for the interval. Let's see how Phil can recover and begin to mount one of his famous comebacks. Who are we kidding? It is going to happen, right? Right? Well, not yet at least. Part wins the first leg of the 6th set on what I believe is a double 1. Phil holds his throw and pins a double tops again on his throw to take a 2-1 lead in the set. And here we go. Surely Phil has turned on the power now. He's got 6 darts in hand to take the set and does so easily. The crowd go nuts, but Phil is subdued, puffs his cheeks in relief, and he opens the 7th with a rapturous 180 and ends up going 2-0 in the lead to set up the victory for the set. He's left with 109 to make it 4-3 in sets, and he hits a 60 and then a 9 and inevitably tops to level the match. He really is sublime, isn't he? And how does he do it? Plain sailing from here, I would imagine. Part is surely crestfallen. Taylor smiles and blows a kiss to the crowd in acknowledgement for their support. Phil holds his own throw for 2-0 and nails his doubles in the 3rd leg as Russ Bray announces that it is indeed headed to 4 sets all. Again, Phil celebrates like he's won the whole thing, and Part collects himself and hits another 180 but finds himself 2-1 behind and it's headed for 5-4. The power needs 167 to close it out. He does indeed nail the bull and take the lead in the match for the first time. The 10th set is a close affair, Part needing 44 at 2-all to equal the match. Never thought I'd be saying this after he took a 3-0 and 4-1 lead. The sheer joy as he sinks it for 5 apiece. His celebration is a mix of relief and ecstasy as he has to stop himself from slumping to the floor. He pumps his chest out to the crowd and they respond in similar fashion. It's now basically a best of 3. The high stakes and high tension in the arena is palpable. Taylor succumbs to it as he no scores and leaves Part 16, which he takes full advantage of to steal the leg. Phil goes outside then inside the wire on 4 to break Part back and level it at 1-all, then 2-all, and Phil's demeanour has changed. No smiles to be seen at the business end of this tournament. Thousands of pounds on the line. Part needs 61 for a 6-5 lead, and he goes for the outer bull and just makes it. Then he lands the double 18 and lets out a massive roar as he regains the lead in the match. It's now or never for the power. Will the legendary streak be broken? 12th set is 2-1 in Phil's favour, and he needs tops to force a sudden death set, the likes of which have never been seen. A true history maker and on course for his 11th world title. He hits double 10 on the second dart and does just that. Here we go, last set decider. There's some confusion as Taylor attempts to leave the stage, but there's no break. A stoic Part looks straight at the board as Phil mutters something to him. An uncharacteristically nervous Taylor misses his chance for 1-0 and Big John makes it count as he pins a 72 checkout. How does he even have the energy to celebrate after all this? Part holds his own throw on a majestic 15 for seemingly the 30th time. He celebrates like he's won. But this time he couldn't be closer. It's the longest final ever and it's come down to this. Let's see if the streak is over. No? Phil puts in a brilliant leg and saves the set. And it's now 2-1 and 6-6 in sets. Part balls his first three darts and hits 85 in the fourth leg, as Phil shoots a 140, then another 140 in an attempt to break Part. Then 100 scored to leave him on a 1-2-1 finish. He goes single 17, treble 18, and needs the bull to level at 2-2 at the death. And he misses. He hits the 25, Part needs 77, and the pressure is on. 19, yes. 18, yes. Double top for the historic upset and a streak ending the win in the first PDC world title for the big Canadian. And he's done it. The greatest the game has ever seen has been defeated. He runs across the stage, arms aloft, and it's just crazy how this is what it takes to topple Taylor, who takes home 25 grand. And next up, the UK Open, a tournament where Phil didn't whitewash anyone. Could it be said that the rest are catching up? No. A difficult year for Phil continues, with a great run against Kevin Painter, Dennis Smith, Paul Dillon and Tommy Wilson to reach the semis. He averaged mid-90s throughout and held an aggregate score of 32-9 in legs going into his match versus Roland Charlton. Phil won the match 11 legs to 5 to reach the final and battle it out for £30,000. It was another defeat for Shane Burgess in the final, who was the victim where Phil got his world record average in the World Championships previously. This match ended 18-8 to the power, taking the head-to-head between the two to 11-0 in favour of Phil. But this was by far the closest meeting they'd had. An overall score of 71-16 in legs or sets. Next up, the first ever Players' Championship, and there was seemingly a lot going on in July of 2003. Phil partook in the first ever Players' Championship held in Blackpool in preparation for the match play. It was a commemorative event for the PDC official Bobby Bourne. He faced Mark Walsh in the last 32, Jamie Harvey in the last 16 before being pitched against Dennis Ovens in a rare meeting between the two. And of course, Phil waltzed into the semis to face Steve Brown, a regular opponent for Taylor in the past times. He won this 6-4 to play none other than John Part again. There must be some flashbacks to the World Finals. This time it is a 7-2 victory for Phil Taylor, who puts an end to an unprecedented 3-match skid against Part. So after warming up with the Bobby Bourne Memorial, it was the main course of the Winter Gardens, and there seems to be a lack of 100 averages from the power this year. But not here. He goes 108 and 102, and it was back to normality with a whitewash against Les Fitton, 10-0. Then Jamie Harvey, who was submitted again by Taylor this year, this time 13-3. Dennis Smith was the next to be knocked out again by Taylor, 16-7. Averages down to the mid-90s now. And in the semi-final, it was a man who threatened to overthrow Taylor in recent years, Peter Manley. Again, it was not to be. Phil won the unanimous decision, 17-10, where the averages were 91 and 89 respectively. It was 11th seed Wayne Mardle who was defeated by Taylor in the World Championships. Mardle took the first leg and the first 10 were shared 5-all until Phil broke Mardle and then held a 7-5 lead. Just when the power was looking like running away with it, Mardle checks out a great 1-4-1 to close the gap. The 2-leg lead is reopened and held as the match goes 11-9 in favour of Taylor, and from here the match takes a turn and Phil turns up the power. He goes 13-9 up and Mardle only wins 3 more legs and the match finishes 18-12. Next up, the Grand Prix. Phil exacted his revenge on Big John in the final of the Grand Prix this year. En route to the final, he was amazingly playing his B game. Steve beaten 4-1, averaging 90, then a poor Dennis Priestley 3-0 at a 92 average. Up next was Alan Warriner, 4-1, where they were both poor, Phil averaging 88. Roland Shelton was the semi-final opponent as he was in the UK Open in May. He's dispatched 6-1 with ease. Just like in May, at a 92 average. On his way to the final, only Alan Warriner averaged anything above 80, and that was nearly 81. Looks like everyone was on their B game too. This was the first tournament in a good while where he didn't average 100 in a game. And Phil thumped Part 7-2 again, as he'd done in the Bobby Bourne. Averaging 94, and he took home 15 grand. This tournament was almost a carbon copy of last year. Notably, this was the second time in history all top 4 seeds had reached the semi-final. Some small tournaments next, the Golden Harvest again, and the 4th in a row and the final win for Taylor at the Golden Harvest came against Andy Jenkins. 4-2 the score, the second meeting between the two in the tournament and 3rd overall, and Phil winning all 3. Next up, it's 2 UK Open Qualifiers. The new tournament started in Cardiff in late July. Phil faced a fresh-faced James Wade in round 1, who as I'm writing this is still world number 5. This ended 5-2 to Phil, who went on to defeat Ronnie Baxter, Paul Carter and Jamie Harvey on his way to the final. In the final it was big Roland Charlton again, and another defeat for Charlton against the greatest of all time. 2-0 and Phil won the inaugural event, taking home 4,000 Welsh dollars. It's nice to see some new rivals like Charlton at the sharp end of tournaments. In late October, it was Roland who went out in the first round to Phil in Londonderry. It was then Simon Watley, Roy Montgomery and Andy Jenkins who got their bodies smacked by our Phil on his way to a final against Hawaii 501. Phil controlled the match and added another £4,000 to his bulging wallet as he cast Mardle down with the Sodomites, as he'd done 3 months earlier in the match play. Finally, we get to the Desert Classic. In the second rendition of the tournament held in the MGM in Vegas, Phil faced Terry Jenkins and Alex Roy in the group stage and set up a clash with Alan Warriner, who may as well have not bothered anymore. The PDC need to start paying for counselling when it comes to the number of times Alan has been beaten by Phil. And this was also 8-5 and Philip averaged 96. He played new nemesis John Part again and again, and it was Part who stole a march on Phil and defeated him 13-10 in a match where both men were within 0.06 of 1 point in the averages. And the end of the road for Taylor here, who headed home.
So we reached the end of 2003, and Phil once again is the PDC ranking leader, and deservedly so. There are almost too many titles to count here, but let's have a go anyway. We entered 1996 with 33 titles in total, so let's add up the totals from 33 onwards. We've got 1 PDC World Pairs, 1 Match of the Century, 1 UK Match Play, 1 Windy City Open, 1 Jersey Festival of Darts, 1 News of the World, 1 Eastbourne Open, 1 Quebec Open, 1 Desert Classic, 1 UK Open, 1 Players Championship, 2 UK Open Qualifiers, 2 Sunpack Masters, 2 Le Scratch Opens, 2 Antwerp Opens, 2 Ranking Leader titles, 4 Which City Opens, 4 Golden Harvests, 5 World Match Plays, 5 Grand Prix, and 6 consecutive World Championships. That's 46 titles from 1996 to 2003, taking his total tally to 79, which means he's averaging 5.75 tournament wins in a year, in a time where there really wasn't many more to play for. So join me again in part 3, where we can take a look at the Power's illustrious career from 2004 to 2010. Please remember to like the video, subscribe and comment if you enjoyed it. And let's just be honest, the darts community is the best place to be, and meet like-minded people. So get out there and have a go. Thanks for watching.